All right, guys, this is Coach Barrline. We're back for your last installment of video lessons for Unit 3, and we're going to be talking today about the counterculture movement, what a lot of you guys probably know as the hippies. The counterculture that emerges in the 1960s and 70s really has a lasting impact on American life. So we're going to talk about the things that allowed for the rise of the counterculture, what life was like for those in the counterculture, how mainstream America reacted to them, and of course what the long-term impacts were of that counterculture movement. So the counterculture was really a rebellion of young people against mainstream American society, specifically teenagers and young adults in their early 20s. Lots of Americans believed that society's values were hollow, that they were meaningless, that they were that Americans were too materialistic, and that priorities had kind of gotten out of whack, and they mistrusted mainstream adults who they called the establishment. And it makes sense, they look around at the world they live in, and things seem to kind of be going poorly. So, obviously they kind of grow to mistrust people that have done that. So they try to establish an alternative culture based on, the ideas of peace and love. And this is where you guys have probably heard of hippies and things of that nature, the idea of free love and stuff like that. So the counterculture came from the fact that there was a huge demographic shift in the 1960s. I mean, the baby boomers were just starting to become teenagers in the 1960s, and so it's going to really change the look of American society. And these people lived in turbulent times. Nuclear war, racial discrimination, segregation. You had civil rights demonstrations and protests going on. Also, the Vietnam War, and really increased awareness about environmental destruction that was going on. So all of these things kind of lead these young people to rebel against the dominant culture. Now, this isn't a new thing, and really a lot of it grows out of the Beat generation of the 1950s. This idea that Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and people like that wrote about, this separateness from society and this criticism of society. And as a result, there was all about challenging authority, experimentation, and of course non-conformist lifestyles, doing things that are not normally considered, part of traditional life. So this kind of centers around the rise of student activism. And on college campuses, you had lots of students that began rebelling against school rules that they thought maybe were too restrictive or not fair, or just that didn't seem to have a point. And Cal Berkeley is really kind of the jumping off point for these protests. At Cal Berkeley, school officials had banned speech making and political organizing at the entrances to the campus, and many students fought back and began what becomes known as the free speech movement. This idea that you go to college to be exposed to new ideas and new people, and that if you restrict speech on the campus, that it limits the ability of students to be educated. So ideas like academic freedom and things of that nature kind of born during this time frame. So most of the students used tactics of civil disobedience early on to protest these rules and these policies. And for the most part, lots of mainstream Americans are shocked by what these young people are doing, because in the culture, young people were supposed to be seen and not heard. They're not supposed to act out and question authority. They're supposed to do what they're told, and when they're adults, then they'll have a chance to contribute. But this really shocks, this actions of the young people shock many Americans. So thousands of teens join the counterculture. Teens and young adults, I should say. They leave schools, jobs, they leave their home life. behind and go to live in this kind of counterculture movement. Many of them rejected materialism and really the idea of work. The idea that people work to get stuff kind of irked the members of the counterculture, and they rejected this idea. I don't need to work any harder than I have to get what I need, because they're putting away this idea of selfishness and materialism that they believe American society had come to represent. And the capital, kind of the unofficial capital of the counterculture movement, is going to be the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. A lot of people are drawn to this area. It becomes a popular spot for many who are leave home and go out to participate in this new trend, this new counterculture movement that's rising. And this gives rise, of course, counterculture to the hippie movement. And hippie culture, they seek new experiences. They're talking about, tuning in, turning on, or tune in, turn on, tune in, and drop out. I'm sorry. Turn on, tune in, and drop out is kind of the catchphrase. And many of these hippies will participate in Eastern religions, astrology, the occult, illegal drugs, and things of that nature. So there's a move towards like Buddhist ideas of enlightenment and reincarnation and things of that. And in fact, lots of hippies use drugs and experimentation with drugs and other alternative types of living to unlock the mind. There's this belief, belief in the hippie culture that people's minds have been enslaved or been locked up by mainstream culture, and that American culture and society had somehow limited people's abilities to think, and they believe that through experimentation, through drugs and music and other methods, meditation, that the mind could be unlocked and people could reach a new sense of consciousness and kind of unlock the mind. Astrology became big during this time period. The signs are Aries, Taurus, Pisces, whatever, right? The occult, to a lesser degree, but I mean, Wicca and other things of that nature start to get bigger. And really, what this really manifests itself as is really just a deification of nature, and this idea of nature being supernatural and mystical and things of that nature. And of course, illegal drugs are going to be a part of that overall culture as well, specifically marijuana and LSD or acid. Many hippies are marked by their casual clothes, sometimes colorful, but more or less casual, functional clothes. Men began wearing longer hair, beards, obviously, which weren't generally the fashion at the time, and African Americans started sporting afros. And the hippie movement leads to the birth of what would be called the flower children, right? All right, so the hippie movement reaches its height really in 1967, the Summer of Love. And, the problem with the hippie movement that leads to its downfall is that a lot of times the freedoms that are celebrated by the hippies, by the counterculture, lead to problems with addiction and things of that nature. Also, the rejection of materialism and the work ethic leaves them having difficulty supporting themselves. Many people try to move and live in communes, but the communes have limited success. I mean, mostly because when you have a lack of rules, when your whole life philosophy is based on do what you feel rather than what you're supposed to do, it's hard to get people to work in the fields to get the food and things of that nature. So that can be a difficulty, and it does oftentimes, the lack of defined roles and things like free love and rampant drug use do lead to major conflicts. So this is a problem for the counterculture movement. For the most part, many mainstream observers were put off by the counterculture. The appearance of the hippies was problematic. Many of the establishment looked at them and thought that they were dirty or not clean, and obviously made assumptions about their work ethic and things of that nature. On a deeper level, however, the main problem is with the view of hippies as disrespectful, uncivilized, and threatening. Many Americans saw this idea of free love and other types of and drug use and things of that nature as sort of threatening to the American way of life and undermining traditional family roles. And it did in many ways. For many in the establishment, it seemed like society was unraveling, which kind of makes sense. If you look at what we talked about in the late 60s and 1968, it seemed like the entire country was sliding into collapse. Things, protests and demonstrations and violence and war on the TV all the time, and this just kind of added to that general feeling of the world being turned upside down. Television show All in the Family really kind of highlights that generation gap that we talked about in the 1968 when we talked about 1968. So All in the Family is a good example, and we may watch a video of All in the Family so you can see what we're talking about there. And despite its short time and its decline, the counterculture did have long-lasting impacts on America. For one, fashion is certainly going to be impacted. Teachers would never have dressed like this before the counterculture movement, the relaxation of dress standards and things like this. This would have been considered unprofessional. Students, for instance, young ladies, you wouldn't have worn pants to school. You would have worn dresses. Gentlemen probably would have worn button-ups, Oxford shirts, maybe even a jacket. So certainly people become more casual in the way they dress. They also become more open-minded about lifestyles and behaviors. Drug use becomes more prevalent. Dating becomes something that more students do, and of course, sexual attitudes are loosened as well. So all of that is a result of the counterculture movement. It certainly influences art because you're going to have the rise of pop art, art that is going to be aimed at popular tastes, not towards the critics, but towards everyday common people. And the leader of this movement is Andy Warhol, who is an icon of the 70s and of the 1970s artistic world. Also, films changed dramatically. I mean, the 70s become a kind of a golden age for American cinema. Godfather, Raging Bull, and A Dog Day Afternoon. You have all kinds of great movies that come out during this time, and so part of that is because censorship rules are relaxed. But that does also lead to the rating system. PG, PG-13, R, NC-17, all that kind of stuff. And of course, music changes greatly. The Beatles are a really great example. Their music and their style kind of is emblematic of the changes in society throughout the 60s. Bob Dylan, probably the most prolific and celebrated poet of the American 20th century. Great songwriter. You guys probably love more of his songs than you even realize because he's written so many. Of course, in 1969, you had the Woodstock Music and Art Fair. That's kind of a celebration of the hippie era. It's really kind of the last gasp of the counterculture. So that's going to end us up on Unit 3. Make sure you're preparing for your tests and getting ready for your exams. Make sure you got your learning tasks and objectives all completed and your quizzes. And we'll see you later. Bye.